Extinction didn't erase their terror. It seems it sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For more than 600 million years, Earth served as a proving ground for predators, with nature constantly the rules of survival. I find myself thinking about those prehistoric landscapes, dense jungles, open oceans, skies filled with predators. It wasn't just about survival then, it was about dominance. Some killers struck with surgical precision, while others overwhelmed with sheer power. And a few, well, they turned death into something almost beautiful, if you weren't the one being eaten. I've always been fascinated by the story of Smilodon. It's humbling to consider that the first Smilodon remains unearthed. In Brazil initially perplexed the scientific community. Those early paleontologists, based on some isolated cheek teeth, actually thought they belonged to a hyena, and they dubbed this new find Hyena neogaea. It's amazing how a few fragments can lead you down the wrong path. Within a couple of years, though, a wave of new fossils emerged. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. It became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon populator was born. Smilodon meaning knife-tooth, and populator, roughly translating to the destroyer, or he who brings devastation. It's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats, for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontini, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontini lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio, with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table. S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch. But they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterian. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of feline physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that, regardless of whether you were facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, you were in equal danger. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to face a Smilodon. Being big is impressive, but this wasn't just a large cat. It was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone was a marvel of natural engineering, robust and elongated. I've read that some paleontologists even speculate that these Ice Age predators could have outleapt modern lions, which have been observed clearing heights of 15 feet. Just imagine a cat the size of a bear, capable of leaping over a one-story building. But the Smilodon's athletic prowess didn't stop at its fancy footwork. Modern big cats have arms that could crush you, but Smilodon's forelimbs took it to the next level. We're talking about limbs that were approximately 20% thicker than what you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even that of the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, Smilodon was further armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. They were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon size. I'm talking about claws twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear, an animal that can weigh twice as much. These weren't just weapons. They were nature's equivalent of grappling hooks, perfect for latching on to large prey. But let's be real, when we think of Smilodon, it's not its impressive vertical leap or powerful forearms that come to mind. It's all about those teeth, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Now, saber teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has played around with this dental design in various mammals and even some non-mammals throughout history, but Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to an entirely new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer audacious length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches, or 20 centimeters long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction, shaped like deadly daggers, with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides. These teeth were designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match. But surprisingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, only about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? Well, that's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise, lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter, capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today, giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodon lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. But most of the bones found in La Brea aren't from herbivores. The La Brea tar pits, when I think of them, I imagine not just animals trapped in sticky asphalt, but predators also meeting their doom. Predators that got stuck trying to eat the trapped herbivores. It's a dark image, isn't it? Smilodon fossils are the second most common find in these pits. Over 166,000 bones have been attributed to it. This has led some scientists to wonder if Smilodon might have been a social animal. The reasoning goes something like this. In modern cat species, the more social ones tend to be more responsive to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon got stuck, it might have called for help, attracting other members of its group who then also got stuck. It's a grim thought, but it could explain why we find so many Smilodon remains in one place. Another fascinating clue pointing to Smilodon's possible social behavior is surprisingly touching, though in a prehistoric, slightly grim way. Some Smilodon fossils show signs of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting nearly impossible, yet these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose what they call pseudo-healthcare among Smilodons. The idea is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like how modern lions or wolves might support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous example is a Smilodon fossil that shows signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, yet managed to survive to adulthood. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted successfully on its own, leading to the heartwarming, if speculative, image of Smilodon families looking after their own. But not everyone's convinced by the Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps like La Brea tend to be more isolated. They argue that this suggests a more solitary lifestyle, more in line with many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing's for it was at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't have competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, if you're picturing the dire wolves from Game of Thrones, it's worth noting that while real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts. But they were formidable predators in their own right, and isotope analysis shows that they had a diet very similar to Smilodons. In other words, these predators were often competing for the same prey. So how did Smilodon stack up against its competitors? Well, when it came to the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible, but when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why, given those sabers being on full display 24/7, most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. Now, we've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How on earth did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seemed like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat, while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats and even other predators use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread, it was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodons, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes think about what it must have been like to walk through those ancient Ice Age landscapes, not just the cold, but the constant threat. It's easy to picture mammoths as the icons of that era, those giants towering 11 feet tall and weighing 6 tons. But the truth is, they weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. There was another species, one that Smilodon encountered in its twilight years, and this encounter would change the face of the planet forever. Humans. It's believed that our ancestors might have first crossed paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine being one of those early humans, armed with nothing but primitive tools, coming face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely tense. After all, we were competing for the same food sources, and by the time humans arrived, only the larger Smilodon populator and fatalis remained. Given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor of Smilodon, was known to occasionally prey on Homo erectus, It's not a stretch to imagine that Smilodon might have considered early humans as potential prey, too. But humans are nothing if not resourceful. While there's no direct evidence yet of human-Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables on these predators from time to time. In 2021, researchers discovered a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But as we know, this coexistence was not to last. Somewhere between then and now, Smilodon disappeared from the face of the earth. The youngest remains of both fatalis and populator date back to around 10,000 years ago, roughly the same time that humans in some parts of the world were figuring out agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon is a topic that continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a significant role in their demise, either through direct competition or by altering habitats. Others are less convinced of humanity's impact, pointing to the broader Quaternary extinction event as the primary culprit. This was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. In a cruel twist of fate, the very adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey now became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was, in essence, too good at what it did, and when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked not just the end of a species, but the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. But even the mighty Smilodon wasn't the most terrifying creature of the Ice Age. Lurking in those same frozen wastelands was a beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. It makes you wonder what it must have been like to witness such a creature. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise, that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of an elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, It was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized, standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail. Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns plural, like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid, pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. But the horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. The Alismarium. Even its name sounds like something out of a myth, a creature perfectly sculpted by the Ice Age itself. Where mammoths were struggling giants, barely clinging to existence in the frozen wastes, this creature was purpose-built for that brutal world. It all starts with the legs. These weren't the thick, slow-moving pillars of a mammoth. No, the legs of the Alismarium were powerful, agile, the foundation for a terrifying charging mechanism. 5 tons of muscle and bone accelerating to a full-speed charge that could flatten anything in its path. Mammoths distributed their weight evenly, but not this creature. Its mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. Millions of years of brutal efficiency honed for one purpose: impact. Its shoulder muscles alone could absorb the shock of high-speed collisions, impacts that would shatter the bones of lesser creatures. And perhaps most critically, it had solved the energy problem that plagued so many Ice Age giants. Mammoths needed vast quantities of vegetation, but the Alismarium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough plants. It wasn't just surviving, it was thriving in conditions that left others struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to others. When it charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat. The entire front end of the creature became an organic siege engine. Mammoths relied on group protection and intimidation. The Alismarium? It needed no such strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare, a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth, this creature stood alone, because nothing else posed a credible threat. And then there's the horn, that magnificent, terrifying horn, up to 6 feet long and weighing perhaps 100 pounds. This wasn't a decoration. It was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and anything else unfortunate enough to be in its path. A horn, longer than the width of a parking space, wielded with the precision of a knight and the force of a freight train. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, the Alismarium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. When it lowered its head, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 miles per hour. The physics alone are frightening, but the horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis suggests it served multiple functions. The base was broad and sturdy enough to act as a snowplow, clearing feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce, this ability to access buried vegetation was a matter of life and death. The horned surface was likely covered in keratin, structured for maximum durability, constantly growing and self-sharpening. Unlike antlers, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, apex predators in their own right, suddenly encountering something that could impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how the elasmarium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began. The mammoth's tusks, impressive as they were, pale in comparison. Tusks were tools. This horn was domination made manifest, a weapon so effective that it redefined the very concept of herbivore. While mammoths were adapting to environments that barely tolerated them, the elasmarium claimed territories that actively welcomed its dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, but what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during that time seemed designed specifically for creatures like this one. Vast open grassland stretched for thousands of miles. Elasmotherium, even the name sounds like something out of a forgotten age. What truly struck me when I first began researching this creature was the sheer scope of its dominion. Imagine a landscape of occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland stretching as far as the eye can see. For a creature built like a living battering ram, this was paradise. No dense forest to navigate, no steep terrain to negotiate, just endless expanses where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. They weren't just surviving in these conditions, they were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds, territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. Their secret, as I understand it, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with an aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that others couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas, and unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck, but the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting prey, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted. Elasmotherium. It wasn't just another Ice Age animal, you see. It was, in my estimation, the pinnacle of prehistoric power. A creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether. Bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When we envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I think we typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus ingens, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 5 feet tall when upright and weighing up to 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early hominin species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominoid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabeys. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great, Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and ingens, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title, I think, for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Kromdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pleistocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone meet up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized post-cranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground-dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a four-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, here's where the social structure gets fascinating, at least to me. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays, a social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened, and Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I sometimes find myself imagining what it must have been like to face down a Dinopithecus, not just one, but a whole troop of them, a defensive circle of 10 or 20 large primates, all muscle and rage. It would have been a serious deterrent, even to large carnivores. This wasn't a creature that backed down easily. It simply didn't need to. During the time when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing significant climatic shifts. For a primate of its exceptional size, these changes brought both unique challenges and new opportunities. Forests were gradually giving way to more open woodlands and grasslands, a transition that favored adaptable, ground-dwelling species. Fossil sites suggest that Dinopithecus inhabited a mosaic landscape, a mix of open savanna interspersed with woodlands and riverine forests, environments not unlike those preferred by modern baboons. Troop life in Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies, with adult males asserting their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Some males weighed up to 150 kilograms. These clashes were anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and lots of eating, and feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilograms of plant matter daily, grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses. But here's the twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope, or the young of larger prey animals, weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their bulk alone may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papionins, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established. Brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in close association with hominin, remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's cradle of humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilograms, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilograms. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have end regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the thought that keeps returning to me is this. Picture a landscape where early humans shared space with megamonkeys, both facing the same predators. It's a fascinating interplay of survival. I imagine that the presence of a troop of these Dinopithecus might have inadvertently offered protection to our hominin ancestors. After all, predators would be less inclined to attack when faced with a group of large, aggressive primates. Of course, the reverse could also have been true. A small group of hominins might attract the attention of predators, which could then spill over to the Dinopithecus nearby. It's a delicate balance, a constant negotiation with danger. And then, around 1.8 to 1.6 million years ago, Dinopithecus vanished. Climate change likely played a significant role as expanding grasslands and shrinking woodlands disrupted their food supply and shelter. There was also the increasing competition from smaller, more adaptable baboons. Then came Homo erectus, adding new layers of challenges. More advanced tools, broader diets, and overlapping ecological needs likely intensified the competition for resources. Predation dynamics shifted too, with emerging carnivores posing increased risks, especially to the young. And while it's harder to confirm, disease might have also played a part. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. The very traits that once made Dinopithecus successful, their large size, slow reproduction, and specialized diet, may have ultimately left them exposed. Their extinction echoes the broader trend of large-bodied species disappearing during the Pleistocene epoch, not in a sudden collapse, but through a gradual decline under mounting press. Then there's the dire wolf. In ancient Greece, it was known as Inoxian dirus, the terrible wolf, a creature so dominant and ferocious that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it. With jaws that could tear through flesh and bones as massive as a mammoth's, it struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. Dire wolves, those apex predators of their time, were renowned for their meat-centric diet and intimidating hunting skills. Their unique dental features, like distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests, set them apart from other wolf species. Their digestive systems were specifically tailored for processing meat, with short intestines optimized for their carnivorous diet. Their robust skeletons, powerful limbs, and broad chests hinted at their incredible strength and prowess in hunting, and their bite force, among the strongest of any canid, enabling them to take down formidable prey with remarkable efficiency. They prowled across diverse landscapes, from the plains of North America to the arid savannas of South America and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison antiquus, Pleistocene horses like Equus scotti, and large ground sloths such as Megalonyx. In South America, they feasted on a variety of prey, including large ground sloths, glyptodons, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camelids like Hemiokinia. And in the eastern Asian steppes, they faced formidable opponents like woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. Amidst fierce competition with other predators like Xenocion, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear, dire wolves fought fiercely for dominance in the food chain. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores, showcasing their dominance by outnumbering gray wolves 5-1, demonstrating remarkable resilience in challenging environments. Living in monogamous pairs and hunting in packs, dire wolves displayed fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics reveal so much about their evolutionary prowess and survival instincts. With their impressive ability to hunt a wide range of prey, adaptability, and ferocity, as well as their versatility in diverse environments, the dire wolf truly stood as a ruler of the food chain. The origin of the dire wolf has sparked debate among scientists, with two conflicting theories proposed. The first, supported by fossil morphology, suggests that an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia gave rise to the dire wolf. The second theory posits that the dire wolf emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Recent advancements in genetic analysis have shed new light on the origins of the dire wolf. Back in 1992, scientists attempted to extract mitochondrial DNA from the skeletal remains of Anocian dirasgilda, a close relative of modern wolves. However, their efforts were thwarted by tar residue from the La Brea pits, which stubbornly clung to the bone material. But in 2021, scientists finally obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils spanning thousands of years. These groundbreaking discoveries revealed the ancient heritage of this magnificent creature. It turns out that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory of an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. And in comparing dire wolves and gray wolves, despite the similarity in their skeletal structures, they are not closely related. This is attributed to convergent evolution, wherein different species develop similar traits independently. Dire wolves stand out as a unique species within the canine world, distinct from modern gray wolves. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. I find it fascinating to think about how the canid family first arrived in North America and then branched out into such diverse forms, from fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini. Dire wolf fossils have turned up in so many different habitats across North and South America. Plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, even arid savannas. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and Tule Springs in Nevada seem to be particularly abundant in fossils. It's interesting how the more recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils challenge some of the earlier ideas about where they could roam. Fossils have been found in various states, mostly east of the Rockies, and in Mexico, especially in the San Jose Cave and El Chedazo. South America, too, has yielded specimens, some less than 17,000 years old, in Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. And that dire wolf fossil found in northeastern China in 2020? It suggests they might have migrated from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. When I think about the physical characteristics of dire wolves, it really brings their adaptations and behaviors into sharper focus. They were similar in proportion to modern North American wolves, like the Yukon wolf, but with some variations. Some specimens from Rancho La Brea were smaller than today's largest northern wolves, but others were larger. They had smaller feet, a larger head, and a more massive skull compared to modern wolves of similar size. There were even geographic differences. Specimens from California and Mexico had distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those from east of the Continental Divide. Some had shorter, lighter limbs, making them less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others had longer limbs, more like the Yukon wolf. About 125,000 years ago, during the Sangamonian interglacial, when the sea level was higher than today, dire wolves were already here. Then came the Wisconsin glacial period, the Ice Age, from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago. They went extinct about 9,500 years ago. It's remarkable to consider that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, with no evidence of interbreeding. The reasons for their extinction are still debated. Climate change, competition with other predators, changes in prey availability. It was likely a combination of factors. Their disappearance marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family, and it likely altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, the climate shifted dramatically, shaping the environment. As apex predators, dire wolves played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity, disrupting ecological balances. Reflecting on the era of the dire wolf, its formidable presence and powerful bite force truly captivates my imagination. But as the curtain fell on the age of the reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel, one where the supporting characters stepped into the spotlight and nearly stole the show. The terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place. A hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole. It was in this steamy prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 3 feet, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. In fact, it was about the same size as a modern-day stork. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set Paleopsilopterus apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. I sometimes imagine the surprise of early European mammals when they first encountered a terror bird, a predator straight from South America, suddenly in their midst. It must have been terrifying. The terror birds, it seemed, were just getting started. Nature had plans to make them bigger, much bigger. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, a new terror bird emerged, Eleutherornis. This bird stood 50% taller than its ancestor and expanded its range unlike any other terror bird. While most terror birds stayed in the Americas, Eleutherornis ventured across the sea to Europe. Fossil remains have been found in France and Switzerland, making it the only known terror bird to have lived outside the New World. As the epochs rolled by, the terror birds continued to grow, adapt, and diversify. It was a competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors in size and ferocity. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, marked a turning point. It was during this time that the family began to truly live up to its name, with the emergence of giants. One of these was Paraphysornis, a Brazilian bird that stood 1.4 meters tall and weighed 180 kilograms. To put that in perspective, it outweighed the largest living bird today, the ostrich. Paraphysornis was built like a feathered tank, with robust bones that spoke of raw power. Paleontologists believe that it hunted using a combination of kicks, slashes, and powerful jabs with its sharp beak. It's like a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. Paraphysornis likely possessed a level of intelligence that set it apart from other contemporary predators. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest that they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, indicating keen senses that would have made them formidable hunters. As impressive as Paraphysornis was, it was merely setting the stage for what was to come. As we step into the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago, we encounter the true giants of the terror bird family. These creatures pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. 3 names stand out: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. While most terror birds were content to dominate South America, Titanus crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America during the Great American Interchange, becoming the only large South American predator to successfully establish itself in North America. This bird lived in what is now the United States, including Texas, Florida, and California. Standing 2 meters tall, Titanus would have been an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. Imagine the shock of a Pleistocene horse or ground sloth, accustomed to saber-toothed cats and dire wolves, suddenly confronted by this alien predator. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters tall and weighed around 250 kilograms. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that gave them increased bite force and pecking power. This suggests that these giants may have been capable of taking down larger prey than previously thought, potentially including some of the megafauna that roamed South America during their reign. The title of the largest terror bird is still hotly debated, with Brontornis giving a Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time and the fourth heaviest bird overall. Interestingly, Brontornis has been the subject of scientific controversy. Some paleontologists have questioned whether it was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all, citing similarities in its toe claws to those of herbivorous birds. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis's vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether Brontornis was a terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. Its weight likely made it slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. I imagine Brontornis as the tank of the terror bird world. The terror birds, they weren't just big, they were fast. I find myself imagining these giant predators, some towering over humans, yet able to reach speeds exceeding 30 miles per hour. That's faster than Usain Bolt, but picture him twice as tall and several times heavier. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to modern-day ostriches, short thigh bones paired with elongated lower leg and foot bones. It's a clear indicator of high-speed running ability. But speed wasn't only for chasing prey. For many terror birds, especially the smaller ones, it was crucial for defense. In a world teeming with giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick escape could mean the difference between life and death. Their imposing size and fearsome beaks often steal the spotlight, but I believe the true power of terror birds lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of their skulls reveal sensory capabilities that put them leagues ahead of many contemporaries. Their eyes, while perhaps not as sharp as a modern raptor's, were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception. What truly set their vision apart was its versatility. They were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and in the dim light of dawn and dusk. And their hearing? The inner ear structure suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. I picture a terror bird standing motionless in a prehistoric forest, head cocked slightly. To a casual observer, it might seem to be resting, but its incredibly sensitive ears are picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. In an instant, it can pinpoint the location of its unsuspecting prey and launch into action. It's no wonder these birds dominated their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers face their downfall. For millions of years, these avian predators ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, the formation of the Isthmus of Panama, about 2.7 million years ago. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their extinction. But, as is often the case, the truth is more complex. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model. It turns out that most terror birds, along with many of their South American competitors, had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in significant numbers. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint. Titanus successfully expanded its range northward during the interchange and coexisted with large canids and felines for millions of years. So, competition alone didn't doom them. The answer, as is often the case, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on gave way to more open environments. The idea that terror birds, these feathered giants, survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America. It's a thought that stays with me. Imagine our ancestors hearing stories of these creatures, passed down through generations. What would an encounter have been like? While some terror birds may have adapted to more open grasslands, others, especially the larger, more specialized species, struggled. The influx of new competitors from North America added press to already stressed populations. Even so, the terror birds proved remarkably resilient. For years, we believed they'd gone extinct around 1 million years ago. But recent discoveries have pushed back that date. Some smaller species have now been dated to as recently as 96,000 years ago. Then there's the set of fossils attributed to an unidentified species, dated to just 18,000 years ago. If that's confirmed, it would mean terror birds survived almost to the arrival of humans in South America around 15,000 years ago. It's unlikely that humans ever directly interacted with them. Still, the possibility that our ancestors heard tales of these creatures isn't entirely far-fetched. Other megafauna that coexisted with early humans, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, left lasting impressions on human culture and mythology. This near miss between humans and terror birds reminds me of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. If the terror birds had managed to hang on just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. Now, stepping away from the terror birds for a moment and thinking about other apex predators of the past, I'm reminded of the Tyrannosaurus rex. In the thick forests of its time, it was the top predator, striking terror into any animal that crossed its path. Its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth made it the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex actually? In 1902, in Montana, Barnum Brown, a paleontologist, discovered the first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton. This discovery sparked a new era in dinosaur research. Major finds, like the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota, have offered invaluable information on the morphology, behavior, and scientific significance of Tyrannosaurus rex. Through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction, researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its role as an apex predator during the late Cretaceous period. T-Rex, along with other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspeltosaurus, are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurini. Within the family Tyrannosauridae, Tyrannosaurus rex, one of the last and most widely recognized tyrannosaurid species, represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to an insane length, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters. That's a distance rivaling the size of a typical school bus. Some paleontological speculation suggests that certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this enormously tall creature with two powerful legs, bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. That's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. The number of tail vertebrae varied, but its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head. Pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short, with two clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsalia metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength, crucial for supporting its bulk. The Tyrannosaurus rex, renowned for its massive size and impressive strength, possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex were truly remarkable. Large fenestrae reduced their weight, and unique adaptations like an extremely wide rear and narrow snout gave them exceptional binocular vision. When I first saw the structure of these skulls, I was struck by how massive, yet somehow fused and pneumatized, the bones were. These skulls, you see, were a key part of what made the Tyrannosaurus rex's bite so much more powerful than other non-tyrannosaurid dinosaurs. That U-shaped tip on the upper jaw? It allowed them to extract more tissue and bone with each bite, even if it put more stress on the front teeth. The teeth themselves were something else. In the upper jaw, they had prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools. This heterodonty was quite distinct, and those other teeth, robust and spaced out, resembled lethal bananas. In mature individuals, the upper jaw even housed larger teeth than the lower jaw. The largest tooth ever discovered measured a staggering 30.5 centimeters. I also noticed numerous small openings in both the upper and lower jaws, hinting at possible sensory functions or perhaps external structures. Of course, when we think of Tyrannosaurus rex, we think of those massive jaws and teeth, but then we remember those disproportionately small arms. For years, they were dismissed as useless, but some now speculate that those arms were anything but. Paleontologist Stephen Stanley, for example, believes they were lethal weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Just 3 feet long, with crescent-shaped claws sharpened to a razor edge. Imagine the T-Rex advancing, that huge head looming, while those strong front limbs made rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscle with frightening accuracy. It gives me a new understanding of how the T-Rex hunted, quickly and effectively immobilizing its prey. What we once thought were useless structures like wisdom teeth in humans or wings on flightless birds may have been crucial weapons, adding to the terror this prehistoric predator inspired. And what about that classic movie scene where characters evade the T-Rex by standing perfectly still? Recent scientific findings suggest that might not be accurate. Paleontologists, using comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, now theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision like modern predators like hawks, able to detect both moving and stationary objects. It certainly challenges the cinematic depiction and deepens my understanding of its sensory capabilities. Some even propose that the T-Rex was an adept ambush predator, using its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Others see it as more of a scavenger, feeding on carrion. These differing views only highlight the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and ecological role, which fuels ongoing debates among researchers. Beyond its eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex also possessed a remarkable sense of smell, much like modern vultures. This keen olfactory ability allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. And it wasn't just about senses. The T-Rex excelled at hunting because of its speed, too. Able to detect prey from a distance, it could pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, a pace comparable to Usain Bolt's world record sprinting speed. Imagine wandering in a primeval environment, trying to navigate back to safety with the noises of the woods echoing around you. Suddenly, a tremendous noise stops you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus rex is approaching, causing your heart to race. Desperately trying to escape the advancing creature, you sprint frantically, your feet pounding on the forest floor. Yet, you feel the earth tremble under your feet as the T-Rex closes in. Glancing back, you see its massive silhouette with gleaming sharp teeth under the sun's rays. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close on you with incredible force. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin simultaneously, sending waves of agony through your body. In that horrifying moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex were integral to its dominance as a top predator during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, the T-Rex was a formidable carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large, herbivorous dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, which were among the toughest dinosaurs of their time and were preyed upon by the T-Rex. At times, it would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its fearsome predatory prowess. It's even believed that the T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind or even formidable predators, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. But the Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings that went beyond its role as an efficient hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses such as speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, the T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influenced ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denversaurus, Ornithomimus, and Anzu. The T-Rex's formidable presence characterized forget the horned helmets and storm-tossed seas you might imagine when you think of Vikings. I've been reading about something far more terrifying that they faced. Creatures so colossal and powerful, they seemed ripped from legend. They weren't just animals, they were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. Armed with iron blades and wooden shields, the Vikings didn't just conquer lands, you see. They battled nature itself in clashes so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The scope of their world and the threats within it were immense. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. Standing at a towering 1.8 meters or 6 feet at the shoulder, these weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms or 2,100 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What made aurochs truly intimidating were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter or 3.3 feet from tip to tip. These weren't defensive tools, mind you. They were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior or even flip a small boat. Archaeological evidence suggests that aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers per hour or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. Many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting press. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaktora forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If you sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, you would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines, colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters tall, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet, These flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Mements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers per hour or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land. Norse seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Elde off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogselg, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. Standing up to 2.1 meters or 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet across, these forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations, unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting prey and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose, with their uniformly dark coats, imagine a single animal providing over 500 kilograms of meat, enough to feed a small village for weeks during the harsh northern winters. That's what the forest elk, a massive deer, meant to Viking communities. And their hides, tougher than domestic cattle leather, were prized for shields, boats, and winter clothing. Perhaps most valued were their enormous antlers, which Viking craftsmen transformed into everything from tools and weapons to drinking horns for isles and kings. Cave paintings in Daons suggest these animals had distinctive light patches on their sides and shoulders, creating a mottled appearance that provided excellent camouflage in dappled forest light. Their behavior was reportedly more aggressive than modern moose, particularly during rooting season when bulls would actively defend territories rather than simply competing for females. By the late Viking Age, these distinctive forest elk populations were already showing signs of decline. The combination of intensive hunting and forest clearing for agriculture fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare, with medieval sources describing them as creatures of the remote wilderness, rather than animals regularly seen near human habitation. But as impressive as these forest giants were, they weren't the only creatures shaping Viking survival. For deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers swam another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable and equally dangerous. While spotting a whale today feels like a rare and wondrous sight, for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. But hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a long ship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. During the Viking Age, however, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, particularly in coastal waters, where their distinctive feeding behavior made them both visible and vulnerable. Atlantic gray whales reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. This made them roughly the size of a Viking longship, a comparison that wouldn't have been lost on Norse seafarers. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that featured in Norse daeons of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique among the cetaceans Vikings encountered was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, gray whales were bottom feeders that plowed the seafloor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. For Norse communities, gray whales represented an extraordinary bounty when successfully hunted. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence from coastal North settlements shows specialized bone tools designed specifically for processing whale meat alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devilfish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate, females typically give birth to just one calf every 2 years, set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. For the forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme, the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years, before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters at the shoulder and weighed between 30 to 45 kilograms. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've always been fascinated by how the Vikings interacted with the animals around them. It's easy to imagine them only as raiders, but they were also settlers, and their relationship with the natural world was complex. One of the most striking examples is their interaction with wolves in the British Isles. Archaeological evidence shows they hunted them quickly after arriving. For Vikings establishing colonies, wolves were both a threat and an opportunity. They attacked livestock, especially sheep, which were vital to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, making them enemies. But Viking warriors also respected the wolf's hunting skills and pack coordination. This complex relationship shows up in Norse place names still found across former Viking territories in Britain. Places like Olvadale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers often encountered these predators. Viking-era runestones from northern England show wolf hunts, suggesting these dangerous activities had ceremonial importance for warriors establishing themselves in new lands. British wolves also influenced a Viking folklore. As Norse settlers mixed with local populations, they adopted and changed Celtic wolf myths. The connection between wolf warriors grew stronger, with berserkers sometimes described wearing wolf pelts. But the fate of British wolves was sealed not by Vikings, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements turned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. This started in the Viking Age, but sped up later. The last wolves in England were gone by the 15th century, and Scotland's last wolves held on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786. There was another animal they encountered that seemed like it was from a more ancient time: the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These living fossils, mostly unchanged for over 200 million years, once thrived in the waterways of Viking territories but have since disappeared from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon grew incredibly large, with females reaching up to 10 feet long and weighing over 60 pounds. Their prehistoric look, with bony plates called scutes instead of scales, made them easy to spot among European fish. Most distinctive was their long, armored snout with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfect for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from the river and sea floor. Their huge size meant that catching one was noteworthy enough to be included in regional sagas. Several Norse tales mention heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements include specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads. These spears show how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons provided valuable resources. Their swim bladders were used to make isinglass, which clarified beer and wine, and also a strong adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint problems. Most prized was sturgeon roe, or caviar, which became a delicacy for earls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already declining in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, with females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes, and pollution worsened their situation. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had become so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, but this protection came too late. As Vikings turned their attention inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to the shaggy titans of the forest, the European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison we know today, these European relatives were adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps, covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations, became known to Vikings as bison roads. They were reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically— I find it incredible to think that a single charge from a European bison could wipe out an entire hunting party. Accounts in Norse sagas tell of exactly that. These weren't creatures to be trifled with. Reaching speeds of 40 kilometers an hour, even in dense woodland, their size and power made them a force to be reckoned with. By the late Viking Age, though, Their numbers were already dwindling across their former range. Intensive hunting, coupled with the relentless clearing of forests for agriculture, pushed these magnificent animals into increasingly isolated pockets. Unlike the aurochs, the European bison managed to narrowly escape complete extinction. A small population clung to existence in the Białowieża forest, nestled between Poland and Belarus. Today, around 7,000 descendants live there, the last direct link to the forest giants that Vikings once hunted. It's a poignant reminder that the world the Vikings knew was vanishing even as they sailed and settled. The very creatures that defined their landscapes were fading into memory, driven to near extinction by the same human expansion and climate changes that, ironically, fueled the Viking Age itself. Extinction didn't erase their terror. If anything, it sealed their legacy in blood and bone. The Smilodon, with its iconic saber-toothed teeth, is instantly recognizable, a status solidified by films like Ice Age. But while the world knows it as a saber-toothed cat, it didn't start out that way. I've always found it fascinating how nature's the rules of survival. For over 600 million years, Earth has been a proving ground for predators. From dense jungles to open oceans to skies filled with murder on wings, prehistoric life wasn't just about survival. It was about dominance. Some killers struck with surgical precision, others overwhelmed with sheer power, and a few turned death into something almost beautiful if you weren't the one being eaten. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild at the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but even the most fearsome hunters aren't always the biggest beasts around. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Yet every so often, nature outdoes itself, creating a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game, that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. And not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat. This was the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age. Meet the Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. Rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off the mark. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new find Hyena neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which by the way seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of felid, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon populator was born. Smilodon, meaning knife tooth, and populator, roughly translating to the destroyer or he who brings devastation. If you're thinking that sounds like the title of a heavy metal album, you're not wrong. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats, for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontini, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the dirk-toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontini lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table: S. gracilis, S. fatalis, and S. populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, but they did have their differences. First up, we have S. gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterion. Next came S. fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. The last, but certainly not least, S. populator, made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury. That's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you are facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, I've always been struck by the image of a prehistoric tank, and that's exactly what the Smilodon was. It wasn't just big, it was built for serious power. Its heel bone alone was a marvel, so robust and elongated that some paleontologists think these Ice Age cats could outleap modern lions. Imagine a cat the size of a bear clearing a 1-story building. But it wasn't just its fancy footwork that made the Smilodon such an impressive predator. Its forelimbs were about 20% thicker than you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it strength surpassing even the larger American lion. And those muscular arms ended in fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved, like prehistoric scimitars. These claws were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of the Smilodon size, twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and longer than a Kodiak brown bear's, an animal that can weigh twice as much. They weren't just weapons. They were nature's grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. Of course, when we think of Smilodon, it's the teeth that immediately come to mind. Those iconic, impossibly long canines have captured imaginations for generations. Saber-teeth weren't unique to Smilodon. Nature played around with this design in various mammals throughout history, but Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to a new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer length. The canines protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. They could grow up to 8 inches long, longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were shaped like deadly daggers with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides designed to pierce deep into flesh. Interestingly, Smilodon's bite wasn't as powerful as you might expect, only about 1,000 newtons, 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? This has been a subject of much debate. One theory suggests Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Hidden in dense vegetation, it would wait for the perfect moment to pounce on unsuspecting prey, using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws to pin down its victim. Then, with precision, it would sink its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. Another scenario suggests that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey and then deliver a precise, lethal bite to the throat, causing severe blood loss and suffocation. Adding fuel to this theory, Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees, almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans suggest excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if that wasn't enough, they were fast, too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions, suggesting they were willing to risk injury in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits and powerful weaponry made it a versatile hunter capable of taking down various megafauna. The specific animals it targeted varied by region. In North America, their prey included giant bison, camels, and even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. In South America, Smilodon targeted creatures like Toxodon, Litopterna, and various species of Glyptodon, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests they occasionally went after caimans. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence, such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside their prey. One big question still debated is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodon lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. The La Brea tar pits are a strange kind of graveyard. Animals wandered in, became trapped, but then also acted as bait for predators. The predators, too, became trapped trying to get at the herbivores. It's a macabre scene playing out over millennia, frozen in asphalt. Smilodon fossils are the second most common find in these pits. We found over 166,000 bones attributed to it. This high number has led some scientists to suggest that Smilodon might have been a social animal. The thinking goes like this. In modern cat species, the more social ones tend to be more responsive to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon got stuck, it might have called for help, attracting other members of its group who then also got stuck. It's a grim thought, but it could explain why we find so many Smilodon remains in one place. Another fascinating clue pointing to Smilodon's possible social behavior is surprisingly touching, though in a prehistoric, slightly grim sense. Some Smilodon fossils show signs of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting nearly impossible. Yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose what they call pseudo-healthcare among Smilodons. The idea is that these injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like how modern lions or wolves might support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous example is a Smilodon fossil that shows signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, yet managed to survive to adulthood. It's hard to imagine how such an animal could have hunted successfully on its own, leading to the heartwarming, if speculative, image of Smilodon families looking after their own. But not everyone's convinced by the Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps like La Brea tend to be more isolated. They argue that this suggests a more solitary lifestyle, more in line with many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing's for it was at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't have competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, if you're picturing the dire wolves from Game of Thrones, it's worth noting that while real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts. But they were formidable predators in their own right. And isotope analysis shows that they had a diet very similar to Smilodons. In other words, these predators were often competing for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon stack up against its competitors? Well, when it came to the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible, but when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why. Given those sabers being on full display 24/7, most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor. But lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures. So, if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. Now, we've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How on earth did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that, too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat, while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats and even other predators use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its 3 species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread. It was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears, proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to walk through those ancient Ice Age landscapes. Real-life ice levels, as they say, but with 100 times more lethal prehistoric cats. And then, into that world came humans. It's believed our ancestors first crossed paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Imagine being one of those early humans, armed with primitive tools, coming face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely tense. We were competing for the same food sources, and by the time humans arrived, only the larger populator and fatalis remained. Bad timing indeed. Given that Megantherion, a possible predecessor of Smilodon, occasionally preyed on Homo erectus, it's not hard to imagine Smilodon considering early humans as potential prey, too. But humans are resourceful. While there's no direct evidence of human-Smilodon confrontations yet, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables sometimes. In 2021, researchers discovered a petroglyph that seems to depict humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent, terrifying creatures. That coexistence didn't last. Smilodon disappeared from the earth. The youngest remains of fatalis and populator date back about 10,000 years ago, around the time humans were discovering agriculture. The extinction of Smilodon continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some argue humans played a role, either through direct competition or by altering habitats with fire. Others are less convinced. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader quaternary extinction event as the primary cause. This period of climate change saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food died out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in a precarious position. In a cruel twist, the very adaptations that made Smilodon a successful hunter of large prey became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was too good at what it did, and when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked the end of a species and an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Mammoths were icons of the Ice Age, 11 feet tall, wrapped in shaggy armor, and weighing 6 tons. But they weren't the scariest things out there, not even close. Lurking in the same frozen wastelands was a creature that made mammoths look quaint. A beast so massive, so brutally engineered, it was less an animal and more a biological battering ram. Imagine the size of a mammoth, but fused with the destructive force of a medieval war machine. This was no gentle giant. It didn't need curved tusks or a coat to command respect. All it needed, was a single monstrous weapon, one so lethal, so precise that every encounter became a high-stakes gamble with survival. This was the true juggernaut of the Ice Age, Elasmotherium sibericum, the creature that should have defined Ice Age dominance. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't nearly intimidating enough. Now multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than the reality of Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally, almost absurdly oversized. Standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single, massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've spent years studying Ice Age megafauna, but the Elasmotherium always stops me cold. A 5-ton rhinoceros with an 8-foot horn, its domination made manifest. The mammoth's tusks, impressive as they were, just pale in comparison. Tusks were tools, but the Elasmotherium's horn? That was something else entirely. While mammoths were essentially oversized elephants struggling to cope with frozen conditions, the Elasmotherium was purpose-built for the harsh realities of that world. I always start with the legs. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs that were better suited for slow, deliberate movement, the Elasmotherium possessed legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile. These weren't just weight-bearing supports. They were the foundation of a charging mechanism that could accelerate 5 tons of muscle and bone into a thundering full-speed charge that could flatten anything in its path. Mammoths carried their weight in a relatively even distribution, but the Elasmotherium didn't. Its mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. It wasn't accidental, but millions of years of brutal efficiency honed into one purpose: impact. The shoulder muscles alone were powerful enough to absorb the shock of high-speed collisions that would have shattered the bones of lesser creatures. Perhaps most critically, the Elasmotherium had solved the fundamental problem that plagued many Ice Age giants: energy efficiency. While mammoths required vast quantities of vegetation to fuel their massive bodies, the Elasmotherium's digestive system was optimized for extracting maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses and tough vegetation that dominated the frozen steppes. This wasn't just survival, it was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. Its skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to creatures with more delicate cranial architecture. This wasn't just about protection, it was about turning the entire head into a weapon system. When the Elasmotherium charged, it wasn't just the horn that posed a threat, it was the entire front end of the creature, functioning as an organic siege engine. Compare this to the mammoth's approach to survival, which largely relied on group protection and intimidation through size. The Elasmotherium needed no such social strategies. It was a solitary predator's nightmare and a territorial competitor's worst enemy, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. While mammoths huddled together for warmth and protection, the Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing else on the frozen landscape posed a credible threat. And now we come to the feature that transformed the Elasmotherium from merely impressive to genuinely legendary, that magnificent, terrifying horn. At up to 6 feet in length and potentially weighing as much as 100 pounds, this wasn't some decorative display piece. This was a weapon that could punch through ice, tree trunks, and presumably any creature unfortunate enough to challenge its owner. To put this in perspective, that's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide, attached to a creature that could wield it with the precision of a medieval knight and the force of a freight train. The positioning was crucial. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, the Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. This placement meant that when the creature lowered its head to charge, the horn became the leading edge of a 5-ton projectile moving at 25 mph. The physics alone are genuinely frightening. But here's where it gets even more interesting. The horn wasn't just a weapon. Analysis of its structure suggests it served multiple functions that gave the Elasmotherium distinct advantages over its contemporaries. The base was broad and sturdy enough to serve as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas that would have been inaccessible to other herbivores. In a world where food was scarce and competition was fierce, this ability to access buried vegetation was literally a matter of life and death. The horn's surface was likely covered in keratin, the same material that makes up our fingernails, but structured for maximum durability. This covering would have been constantly growing and self-sharpening, ensuring that the weapon remained effective throughout the creature's lifetime. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool of destruction. Recent fossil evidence suggests the horn may have been even more formidable than previously imagined. Some specimens show evidence of horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long, weapons that would have made the creature's intimidation factor approach the genuinely absurd. An 8-foot horn on a 5-ton creature represents a level of natural weaponry that has no modern equivalent. Imagine being a saber-toothed cat or cave bear, creatures that were accustomed to being the apex predators of their respective environments, suddenly encountering something that could quite literally impale you from 8 feet away. The horn didn't just change how the Elasmotherium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live, constantly aware that somewhere in the frozen wilderness there was a creature carrying a weapon that could end any confrontation before it truly began.